This is one of the rear hub carriers. It's really dirty, and there was quite a bit of a problem with this one. One of these bolts had broken off in this hole, but I managed to get it out by welding on the end, then threading it out, and I've shot some video of this, so that I'll show you now. As you can see, all these bolts have come out, except this one. This one is broken off. Now to try to get this out, we're just going to build up the weld on top here, and then we're going to weld on another nut, and then hopefully we'll get this piece of bolt out. I was finally able to get the broken off bolt out of this rear bearing carrier. I did this by first building up the volume of the bolt by welding to it. Then I welded a very thick washer to the bolt. Then I welded a very thick nut on top of that washer, so I can use my breaker bar and a lot of penetration fluid to get the bolt out. So this is the bolt that was stuck in there. This is the very thick washer that I welded to it. This is the thick nut. And as you can see, it took me, I think, 3 tries, but I finally got it out. So now we can start restoring this rear bearing carrier. We're going to start by taking this bearing out because it's halfway there. So well, this bearing didn't need much help, but it will make things easier for this side. This is the rear bearing spacer. I would like to heat the carrier up a little bit because it's aluminium and it will expand a little bit, which will make it a bit easier to get the bearing out. And the socket's quite dirty. But the bearings are out. I think they're in quite nice condition, but they needed clean, so firstly, we're going to remove these bolts that are in here, and then we can start cleaning everything. So these are the 2 studs that need to come out. As you can see, one is quite loose. I've just sprayed a little bit of penetrating oil on here. The 2 on the other carrier have come out quite easily. This one's already loose. Now it's out completely. These are the 2 bearing carriers that are completely stripped. All the bolts are out, all the bearings are out. So now we can start by cleaning them a little bit. I'll start with this one. I'm just going to take a stainless steel wire brush just going to brush off all of the dirt. So as you can see, there's a little bit of grease that doesn't really want to come off, but we'll take off what we can take off, and then we'll use other methods to get this off. Okay, I've removed most of the big pieces of dirt and the largest parts of the corrosion, and it looks a lot better, but it's still quite dirty. There's still some dirt on there and still some little bit of corrosion, especially on the ends here and on the inside of the bearing surfaces. So now I'm going to thoroughly clean this with a wire wheel on my angle grinder and some sanding paper to make sure I can completely clean them and that all the corrosion is off and they look brand new again, hopefully. The ideal solution to clean these would be soda blasting. However, I don't have a compressor that I can use or any soda blasting equipment, so I'm going to do it the manual way, but hopefully it'll come out quite nice. And this is the one that you've seen earlier where I removed the big pieces of dirt off. This is the one that I cleaned with a wire wheel on an angle grinder, and you have to be quite careful because it's a stainless wire wheel and it's a little bit harder than the aluminium, but as you can see it cleans up really nicely, and it's maybe a bit too shiny, but I've done the large surfaces. Now I'm going to use a little wire wheel and a Dremel to get it into all of the corners and to clean off the inside. But you can see that there's quite a big difference between both of the parts. I've completely cleaned both of the bearing carriers, and the inside of the bearing mounting surfaces are especially clean now because there was quite a bit of rust in there. And you might guess why if you see the state of these bearings. So I got in there with a Dremel tool and a very small wire wheel, and I cleaned out the inside surfaces. So I've polished everything, first with this scuff pad, and then afterwards I just polished it again with a cloth and the auto swap polish, and they really came out really nice. Now normally you should just put these on like this, but because they're in a quite awkward position on the rear suspension and they will corrode quite quickly, I'm going to clear coat mine, and that way hopefully the dirt won't stick to them that much, and that way also the dirt and the water won't have direct contact with the aluminium, which will hopefully prevent it corroding, because this is a part that it's unique to the Europa. It's quite intricate and it's not cheap to replace. So these are the restored rear bearing carriers, and I've shown you that I retapped all of the threads in the aluminium, and I've shown this to some of my fellow Europa owners, and they suggested that I would reinforce the threads because they're known to strip because the aluminium is quite weak. And I've done some research on this, and I had to choose between a helicoil type insert or a solid insert like a time sort insert. But while I was reading up on everything, I found out that Airbus also uses helicoil type inserts. These look like this, or they're a spring type insert. So if it's good enough for Airbus on their aluminium parts, it's good enough for me. So that's what we're going to do now. I'll quickly run you through everything that you'll need to do this. So the first thing that you'll need is one of these helicoil kits. This one is made by helicoil in Germany, and this is for 5/16 UNF size. The helicoil brand isn't that popular in Europe, but the helicoil is. This is also very high quality. It comes with a drill that's specific for size, a tab, 10 short inserts, and I bought some longer ones as well, a handle to thread in the inserts, and a punch to punch out the little tab. You'll need to supply your own tab handle, and you'll need a drill. Now, to make sure that these inserts work the way they should, it's better to use Loctite, but you have to use it in a very specific way, and I'll show you that in a minute. You'll need some Q-tips and a little bit of acetone. So I'll start on one of the bearing carriers and I'll talk you through everything. I'm going to explain step by step how to put a helicoil into this hole. So we're going to start off by drilling out the aluminium threads in this hole. We're going to use a cordless drill and the drill that's supplied in the kit. The key here is to drill as straight as you can to make sure that the hole is perpendicular to this surface. So now the hole's drilled. Now we need to tap it with the supplied tap. We want to lube the hole a little bit with some cutting fluid, some cutting oil, just to make sure that the tap stays nice and sharp. So you have your tap handle mounted. Now we want to get the tap perpendicular to this surface. Now while you're tapping, for every half turn you go clockwise, you want to go a full turn counterclockwise. This is to break the chips in the hole, and that way you can't get your tap stuck in the hole, because if your tap breaks off, you're in really big trouble. Once you've completely cleared the thread, you can feel it loosen up. Now you can move the tap up and down a few times to make sure that the thread is nice and clean. As you can see, it really moves freely now. So I'll take the tap out. Now take one of our Q-tips and a little bit of acetone, and you want to clean out all of the oil, the cutting fluid. This. Now we're going to install one of the helicoils, and I told you I've got long ones and short ones. These are the standard ones. As you can see, they're quite short compared to the threaded area that was there before. This is one of the longer helicoils. I think this is 1.5 times the thread diameter. This is 2.5 times, I think. As you can see, this is approximately the length of the thread. Now you can get these in sizes much bigger than this, but this is the one I chose. This is the handle that's used to thread in the helicoil. Now normally you wouldn't use any Loctite with helicoils, but then you have a problem that sometimes when you thread out the bolt, the helicoils comes out with it. And I read online that in some factories, to prevent this, they've found a solution, and they use a little bit of Loctite on the threads, and only on these threads, so the threads between the casting and the helicoil. So this is some regular high strength Loctite. I'm going to put a little bit on here, like so. Then we're going to take our helicoil. I'm going to thread it in here carefully. Make sure that we don't cross thread it. Now the instructions say that you want to get the insert half a turn past the surface, but I like to be a little bit safer, and because this thread area is a little bit longer than the insert itself, it's quite safe just to put it half a turn more. So now we need to break off the little tab that's underneath here. It's this, and you just have to use this sponge, put it on the tab, break it off. See if I can find it. Well, there's one here, so this is what one of these small tabs look like when they're broken off. Now, the important thing is that you do not thread a bolt in here right now, because otherwise the Loctite will seize the bolt onto the helicoil, and then it will certainly come out when you take the bolt out. So we're going to take a Q-tip, a little bit of acetone, and you just want to clean the threads on the inside of the insert so that there's definitely not any Loctite on there. Now I'll quickly thread in a bolt just to show you that it works, but I'll take it right out. As you can see, steel threads. This is one of the aluminium threads. They work as well, but they're not quite as strong as these. There are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, the surface area of the insert is a lot bigger than the surface area of just the bolt. The second reason is that the steel is much stronger than the aluminium. So you won't have to be really careful that you don't strip the threads. And also when you're driving hard, you won't have second thoughts on if these threads are going to strip, because they're keeping the wheel on the car. So that's one. I'll do the rest and I'll show you what they look like when I'm finished. I've finished installing all of the inserts, as you can see. These three are small ones, all the rest are the longer ones, and all went without issue except one that didn't really want to get there, so I had to remove it. You just use some pliers and you pull it towards the center of the thread of the hole, and then it unwinds and you can just remove it and install another one. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I also removed the lacquer that I put on these. On this one I already did it, and this one I still need to do it, because I didn't like the finish. It was already peeling off, and I just felt that it really wasn't up to it. And when you're removing it and the lacquer peels off in sheets as big as this, you know it's not working. So I'm going to remove the lacquer from this one as well, repolish them both, and then paint them with a different kind of paint, because the KBS diamond finish really isn't up to it. So these are all the parts of the rear suspension that have been completely restored and painted, and now they're ready for installation, but we'll do that in a next video. So this is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. In the next video we'll continue work on the rear suspension and we'll install everything that we restored in this video. If you have any questions, you can just post them below, or you can send me an email through my website. You can always subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of my next videos, and I hope I'll see you next time. Goodbye.